My name is Pascal Gielen. I'm a sociologist of culture. I'm based in Antwerp, that's in Belgium, the Flemish part speaking of Belgium is it. And I do research on culture and the arts in general. That's my job. I will speak today about how art institutions can deal with refugees, immigrants, and in general what I call multiculturalism. And the speech will about that multiculturalism was a mistake and that we have to search for other ways to deal with people who are not integrated in our society, and that means that we have to fight for other ways of integration. So because multiculturalism is only about the representation of people, and it is not about changing structures in institutions like art institutions, like museums, etc., to really change also the structures that other cultures, etc., can be represented, not only in the front stage, but also in the backstage of those organizations. So that's my talk about. Commoning comes from, is a verb, and it comes from the commons. And the commons is standing from already 15th and 16th century common ground. It was the ground where shepherds, for example, could share the space for their sheep. So it is a space, in fact, to say it very black and white, it's not a market space because it's not a commercial space. It is common use by a lot of users. And at the same time, it is also not a space organized by state. So it's not what we call public space, in that sense, public space of the state, subsidized by the state, regulated by the state. So commons is managed by people themselves, by citizens who take care of that and make their own regulations. So it is a kind of almost, let's say it's a kind of anarchistic space, in that sense anarchistic, that people organize and themselves and manage themselves in it. It's of course not anarchistic at all because it's very well regulated. You need regulations to share common ground, because otherwise you get fights or you get free riders who take things off it, etc. So this was really based on the 15th, 16th century, but nowadays there is a revival of this commons. It started certainly, I think, by the booming of internet and creative commons on internet, where people also share information and knowledge. So it's not only anymore material goods, but also immaterial goods. Immaterial goods such as, again, knowledge, codes, affects, emotions, are all part of this kind of common sharing. And one very important common thing is culture. So we have culture for free because we share it. You get it already from your parents. The language, for example, you get this for free. And this is common between us. But of course, more and more nowadays, this kind of common things, companies try to commercialize, privatize. For example, also, in fact, social relationships are for free. They are common, you share social relationships, but nowadays organizations like Facebook try to make profit of it. So they commercialize in a way the social relationships, and that makes it completely different. And so that's why commoning now is coming up. A lot of people are fighting again to share those spaces, social relationships, communications, affects for free. And we try to regulate that. The Common Quest Office is my research group. It's a team. And It's a team what does research about sustainable creativity. So we try to find out how creative labor, for example, a lot of creative jobs in design, but also architecture, filmmaking, etc. How we can make this nowadays sustainable. And this is a response, in fact, to a kind of hype or boom, especially in Europe, on creative industries. There is a huge shift in cultural policy, from cultural policy to creative industry policy, creative cities policy, etc. That means that governments start to invest in creative industries, commercial industries also, but most of the time they only do this as startups, so very much in the beginning of it. And this is not sustainable at all. So what we see in this field of this creative field, again, which is very broad, from the arts to web designers, we see a lot of, on the individual level, a lot of burnouts. People younger and younger get a burnout in this field because they have to jump from project to project. They always have to use their mind. They always need to be creative. They always have to come with new ideas, etc. So there is a lot of stress going on in this field. So that makes it not sustainable on the long run. And also on what sociologists call the meso level, I mean the organizational level, we see a lot of bankruptcy. So small companies only get subsidized to start up, and then after 2 or 3 years they get bankrupt. So this is also not sustainable. And then on the third level, that's what we call the macro level as sociologists. That means as society as such, and in general, you see because of this huge competition between creatives, you see a thing what is emerging nowadays, which is called competitive isomorphism. It means that because people are in competition with each other, they look at each other because they compete, and they try to distinct themselves. They try to make just something else. But by looking at each other, they mirror each other, and they do the same. So you get a homogenization of culture in general, which is also on the long run not sustainable for creativity, and even not sustainable for a creative market, a commercial market at that. So and that's, our research is a response to that, to all those things which are not sustainable on all those levels, and we try to find out how we can make it sustainable again, this working in this field on the long run. And we do this with the CCQO, so the Culture Commons Quest Office, with an interdisciplinary team, with an economist, for example, who's looking at what could be interesting or new business models, with a lawyer who's really thinking about new legislations, new laws, regulations for this field. And we are all focusing with all of them to the commons, because a lot of artists mentioned this in an interview. They say we need something else than authorship nowadays, which is not our authorship but of big companies. So the author is not anymore in charge of his own authorship, but it is companies who distribute it, for example, publishing houses, big publishing houses, etc. And they say we want to have our own rights again, of our own creativity, and that is mentioned the commons again. We want to make it common, for common use, that everybody can use it, that we can share ideas to be creative on the long run. And so this lawyer, for example, but there's also this economist, the sociologist is in, they are all looking at what are, for example, new regulations to make this common ground of common creativity happen in the future. Thank you.